Hello and welcome to D&Dark, a comedy horror adventure starring some of history's most infamous monsters. I'm Danger Dangers, and I am your host and Cryptkeeper.
Mr. Man stealing my show, he's the host, what the bump? I mean,
I'm just a passenger this time around.
Technically you're in the driver's seat because you wanted to play some Mega Man, sir. So I get to sit here in the passenger seat and enjoy someone else playing the game, and I don't have to think, okay, hold on, I've also got to play the game and think of things to talk about.
I suppose that's fair.
So,
lemon.
Did you ever see the Ego Raptor? Back when, well, I mean, I guess he is
the sequelitis?
Yeah, sequelitis.
I did.
That was every single time I play this stage. I always think of the
like delay.
Oh no! I always think of the part where he's talking about it all, and he's like, red on cars, and then it's like, but so we got you on here as per the reasons of talking about D&Dark, and of course this is the series, the mini series, I guess we could say, on my channel, Into the Dark. I've been trying to get the players all together, and we've got a couple of them recorded. Now, I'm excited to have you on here, and I know that you've got some sensitive information, and of course, we're not asking for any spoilers, but of course, me being Jack, I mean, if you want, I could roll to see if I can get any extra info.
Don't worry, I'll tell you exactly when I plan to kill you off.
Yay! So, now, when you were coming up with this idea, what kind of spawned the start of all this?
I was actually, I was listening to the podcast Dungeons and Daddies, not a BDSM podcast.
Oh.
That's part of the title. But I was listening through, it was a podcast that Jordan and some friends of mine all started listening to around the same time and got me into, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And the idea of real play podcasts had never really appealed to me all that much until I listened to that one, and it just kind of got the wheels spinning of like similar, not thematically similar, but structurally similar things that I could try my hand at.
Right.
And I've always been a fan of, like, Halloween has always been my holiday, and ooky spooky stuff, and especially the, like, campy early 50s version of ooky spooky has always appealed to me and been, like, a near and dear thing to me. So, it was just a thing that I was kind of tossing around, and I wanted to do it initially as a one-off. I thought, it would be a pretty cool one-shot to do just like a thing in the graveyard where everybody's playing as the monsters. I can just throw together some character pre-gens real quick. And in my planning for it, it very quickly spiraled out of control and was no longer anywhere near a one-shot. And I think it was actually you who encouraged me to start recording it and treat it as a podcast. I wanted to, I had my test group basically going through doing a scaled down version of it with slightly different characters, and I wanted to get a group to be able to do it for like the full length and entire scope that I had planned out. And I approached you about it, and you were the one who kind of suggested and encouraged, hey, you should be recording this and make some content out of it. And everything happened from there.
Yeah. I honestly, like, a lot of this was just kind of spurred on, like you were even mentioning, with other podcasts that I was even listening to. And even though, like, we listen to podcasts and like, the listener themselves might think that, like, oh, it's simple. Like, you sit down, you press the record button, and you just go. It's definitely not that simple.
Oh, not even remotely.
And especially for you, I would say that you probably have 110% more work just because you have to account for at this current moment of time, 5 other people.
Oh yeah.
And then also all the shenanigans and possibilities that can or cannot happen. So I'm assuming that there's possibly things that you planned for that had not happened.
There were a few things. For the most part, you guys have been pretty good about following my adventure hooks. That was the thing that I was terrified of, was that I would plan all this stuff out and you guys would just flat out ignore it.
I will admit, in episode 1, when I think it was Raynor saw the Invisible Man.
Mm-hmm.
I, as the character, I wanted to get the bump out of there. Like, I was gonna try my hardest to basically just like book it and get out of the story. But I mean, the way that you were able to kind of like capture it and kind of like just say the skull, or not the skull, but the brain comes out and there's all of a sudden a giant wave that you just feel. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this all happened like way too quick. Like 100% Jack would very much be curious as to like, oh, what did he just pull out? That's a brain. What is that? And it's like he would want to know. So that whole curiosity factor, as per the character, I think very much played to your benefit. Because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, okay, get out of there, get out, and then just the story kind of took over. So I really enjoyed the fact that you're able to essentially give us the chance to either follow or not follow the story hooks, but in the end, you rein us in. So, and then
nice.
I had a question. When you were coming up with, and not for any spoilers, but when you were coming up with the character Raynor, like, is that a canon villain or character, or is that an original concept of yours?
He is sort of he's kind of a little bit inspired by the G-Man from Half-Life. He's not really like, Raynor LaRoe is a name that I smashed together from a couple of different a lot of my NPCs that are not necessarily a pre-established character are people whose names I smashed together from authors of gothic horror books, or like poets of the time, just contemporary late 1800s writers. So there's a handful of other names that I take that are just straight up stolen from authors. And so Raynor LaRoe, I take that from Gaston Leroux, who wrote The Phantom of the Opera.
Oh.
Now, Raynor is just a name that I thought, like, oh, that's a good vampire name.
Yeah.
So I just kind of took that and waited to see what kind of character would develop from him. Like I mentioned, he's kind of gone in the direction of the G-Man from Half-Life, but I mostly wanted to have like an unsettlingly, just completely crazy, batshit insane antagonist.
Okay.
I don't know that you've necessarily seen the full extent of that yet, but for the introduction, I at least am happy that he got a little bit of that sort of unsettling presence.
Right. And I think his character is, at least for me, pretty damn fascinating, just because it's a character that we've come across, but of course we don't know very much about. And at least I'll say, mostly just speaking through Jack's eyes, he knows nothing of any of this occult stuff, so he just thinks that everyone is a regular person. And all of a sudden, this random guy is able to see him in his most, I almost want to say, like, OP form.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of like shatter that whole illusion. It kind of like brings almost everyone down to ground level, to where it's like, yeah, you're the Frankenstein monster, but you're definitely not going to beat this guy. Yeah, you're the Wolfman, but you're definitely not going to beat this guy. Yeah, you're the Mummy, but you're definitely not going to beat this guy. Like, in episode 1, he ends up going toe-to-toe with Van Helsing, and if anyone knows the history of Van Helsing, he's supposed to be this badass hunter. And that was something else that I was excited that you introduced. Like, Van Helsing's been a character that I have liked in the past, and I was excited to see what he was going to be able to do. And then how did you come up with a class for Van Helsing and let's say the others?
That was taken from the Critical Role class, the Blood Hunter.
Okay.
I do play around with that a little bit, and a lot of I kind of decided early on to start incorporating that a little bit, and a lot of what that first area is built around, the entire first chapter is very structured around the Blood Hunter class, both in terms of NPCs and as like player options and things like that, just mechanically and narratively setting up how that kind of works within this world. It also, and you will understand what I mean by this, any listeners, you'll understand once you get a handful of episodes in. If I'm being perfectly honest, this first chapter was structured first and foremost around the pipe organ.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first idea that I had, was how that pipe organ gets incorporated and used later down the line. But basically that was the first idea that I had, and a lot of the rest of it kind of filled out around it. It was kind of working off of those two central ideas of setting up, using the setting of a church, graveyard, cemetery, and crypt, and having that set piece of the pipe organ, as well as kind of using it as somewhat of a, like, show by example how the Blood Hunter class works in this setup.
Okay. And then even with, let's say, Emotep or Wolfman, or, I mean, I'll say that at least maybe Phantom it kind of lends itself to be a bard.
Yeah.
But how did you think of the idea that Wolfman was going to be a warlock, or that Emotep would be a cleric of all things?
That was, there's a lot of, there's sort of a unique thing with each of them. So for Phantom, obviously that one lends itself very well to being a bard, like you said. Invisible Man similarly was like built to be a rogue,
right,
just kind of narratively.
Right.
With the rest of them, for Imhotep, that's a little bit inspired by the 50s one, a little bit inspired by the 90s Brendan Fraser one, how that version of Imhotep is almost a lich, but he does a lot of necromancy-based magic, and the original Mummy is also very magically based too, so I kind of knew right off the bat that he needed to be one of the magic-wielding classes.
Right.
And Cleric worked pretty well, since one of the subclasses is the Death Domain and kind of skews in a more necromancy area. I figured that would be a good setup for that. Barbarian for the Frankenstein monster, right, was one that it's not necessarily an obvious one, but it was one that when I saw the subclass Path of the Storm Herald, I thought that would be a really cool way to sort of integrate those things together, build him as this kind of brute force, massive monstrosity that kind of has those elements of like storms brewing in the atmosphere as his power kind of accumulates. For the Wolfman, that was kind of my most out there pick.
Okay.
That one was more mechanically as a way of like, okay, how do I make Wolfman, when he's not a werewolf, right, mechanically interesting to play?
Right.
And one of the big aspects of the Wolfman movie is that the whole thing is set to the backdrop of there's a traveling band of Romani fortune tellers. And so tarot-based magic and fortune-telling and a lot of, like, paganistic beliefs play a big thematic factor in that. And the Warlock subclass, he, even in the movie, is kind of taken under the wing of Maleva, who is this Romani fortune-teller, who kind of guides him through his transformation in the movie setup. So I figured, like, okay, I can kind of take something off of that, reshape her as somewhat of a patron, and see if I can cobble together a tarot-based magic system.
Okay.
So it does still use most of the primary Warlock spells and mechanics and everything, but it has built on top of that. I found a variation of a homebrew. I kind of did a lot of editorializing of it, but I found a concept online of how to do a tarot-based magic system.
Okay.
So that one was a lot more experimental than some of the others, and I'm really liking how it's shaped up. It gives a lot of extra texture to Larry as a person, making it so that he's not only interesting when he's a werewolf.
Right. Because, I mean, as per the movies themselves, I don't mean to sound like that guy, but the wolf themselves in the movies isn't, to me, that interesting because there's not a lot of character development. It's just kind of like a rabid dog.
Yeah, he's not especially interesting, and Larry's kind of an interesting figure in the movies themselves. He's a lot more sympathetic in the sequel than he is in the original one.
Okay.
He's kind of an awkward, loser's not the right term, but he's has very poor social skills and just kind of keeps to himself. And he, in the sequel, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, gets a lot more endearing and interesting and becomes an incredibly tragic figure. So I kind of was working with Jordan to build him off of that a little bit more and kind of get her own take and read on it. And I think we've hit a medium where both aspects of the Wolfman are going to be interesting to see.
Right.
Where both him as a person and him as a monster.
Okay. And then almost kind of like wrapping up, because we're getting decently close, and maybe we'll chat a little bit more while you're fighting the completely blank chill penguin.
The frostiest bird.
Exactly. So if you had the option to play, what character would you want to play?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would probably, this is somewhat of a cop-out, but one of the characters that my test group had that didn't feature with this group was we had Jekyll and Hyde.
Okay.
And that's probably the one that I would want to pick. We kind of structured him a little bit similarly to how the Wolfman ends up working out. He has his own unique differences to it, but the basic conceit of him was, take that, chill penguin.
Hell yeah!
But basically, he was an artificer, and he had the ability to, at any time, take the hide potion to get a massive stat boost across the board, but was no longer in control of his actions and had to wrestle against the DM in order to do anything.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I think this is a defense. It's a defense stopping point.
It's a very defense point.
Very much. So, I wanted to say thank you for coming on with all this and sharing what you could share. Of course, we're not. The point of this is not to get into any spoilers. It's just simply to kind of highlight the characters and also the inspirations and, of course, the man behind all of this. So, and I mean, I think it's been pretty apparent that you essentially created all the character archetypes and you essentially, quote unquote, casted everybody.
More or less. I made the character sheets as a pre-gen, but I left a lot of the details completely open to interpretation. And the way that everybody is playing these characters is very much not what I expected in a good way.
Right.
They're fleshing out to be so much richer and more interesting than I anticipated.
Oh, good.
And a lot of that is coming from all of you guys and what you all are bringing to the table. I basically just kind of gave you the pieces. You're the ones who arranged them into a more interesting puzzle piece.
Right. And even just real quickly off mic, I think one of my favorite things that, of course, that I want to praise you for is that no matter when I had a question about my character, I didn't have to call and ask you like, hey, would Jack do this? Would this be the thing? Or what? And it's like, all I really ever had to do was look back at the character sheet and figure, okay, he's already given me a seed right here. What if I take that to the nth degree? And I love the fact that no matter where I was in working with Jack, it was always, let's go back to the character sheet and figure out where I can go from here. So you did a fantastic job with all of that. I want to make sure that you know that it's my first time that I've done any kind of D&D, and even though I'm partial already, I'm immediately in love with this character. It really fucking sucks that it's gonna be maybe like a one-off, but who knows? Like we don't know what the future has. I mean, you're the one that has all the stories, so
there is a lot more in store.
Okay.
I plan on not dragging this out,
right?
But the story's gonna go it's still got quite a decent ways to go,
right? Especially from episode 1 that we're at.
Yeah.
So, but yes, we've got some more adventures planned. Interesting character developments that are going to be coming out and coming towards everyone. But let's just go ahead and wrap it up here. Again, wanted to say thank you for coming on and sharing what you could share.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and happy to chat.
And I have been Grayson. This has been
Danger Dangers,
our Cryptkeeper. This has been Mega Man X. With all that, just like with every other video that I tell you guys, make sure to, of course, take care of yourselves, take care of each other.
And listen to D&Dark.
You can listen to D&Dark on all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more, with new episodes premiering on Wednesdays. Follow us on Twitter at D&Dark Podcast to stay up to date with our goings-on, and we look forward to seeing you join us as we venture into the dark.